Ladies and gentlemen, I think that this is the most broken, overpowered build right now in Elden Ring, thanks to the recent patch, Arcane, and especially so, Bloodloss weapons have become even more insane than ever before. In this video we're gonna check out a build that I wanted to be good in such a long time, and it finally is, making use of possibly one of the coolest weapons in the game, creating Bloodloss in a very large area for literal thousands and thousands of damage. So let's jump right in. Now this one is going to make use of a few weapons. Actually, a ton of the blood weapons from previous patches are now way stronger than ever before. The bread and butter for this build though are gonna be made out of like 3 katanas and 1 very strong spear. Well, this is gonna be the Mogwin's sacred spear that you get from the boss with the same name here in the Mogwin Palace. You do have to defeat the boss in the area that I don't want to really spoil, and once you do that you can choose this amazing spear. Now if you fought against this boss, you know where I'm going with this one, because the spear has a special blood boon ritual ability that kind of performs a huge AoE sort of blood loss kind of thing that just annihilates enemies. Well, it used to suck in the previous update, it barely did any damage. In the new update, well, I mean, the numbers just speak for themselves. You're gonna be like stacking up 13, 14, 15k, and I mean that literally without like just using any bugged interactions or anything else. Just the spear, a good investment into Arcane, and that's pretty much it. Now a quick rundown of the attributes at level 120 with this character would look something like this. 40 points into Vigor, we're quite static during that ritual, so we want to tank as much as possible. 20 points into Mind plus 5 from Marika's Source Seal means that we have enough to cast that incantation slash, well, spell in this case. Endurance only 30 points, maybe you can go even lower. You're gonna block with shields in this case and barely do any dodging. Enemies will die way before you even have the time to do some dodging. 24 points only into strength, that's the minimum requirement on the spear, and that's the max I recommend with this build. Dexterity sees some of the extra points I've had left invested into that, since we're also using a bunch of katanas. And finally 50 points into Arcane plus 5 from Marika's Source Seal in this case means that we're gonna stack as much blood loss as possible and deal as much damage as possible from Arcane scaling with these weapons. In the case of the spear, it's not just great for the L2 spam, it's also amazing when you couple it with a shield. It has a long reach, you can keep the shield up and then just poke enemies with a spear and they will be dead long before they come to you. And not just that, you also set them on fire, so if you kind of like want to switch a bit into Faith, you can definitely buff a bit of that damage, especially on the fire component. Now in terms of some of the other weapons, you can get Eleonora's pole blade, which has been fully fixed in the new update. It's so amazing in fact that it's now fully viable for pretty much any content from at least my experience. You do get this really awesome L2 skill where you do a small wind up followed up by a series of spins and heavy attacks that more often than not will stagger enemies and also provide a huge bleed build up. You can also follow up with a second L2, which is going to do this backwards jump that can just throw you out of harm's way. So it's amazing to take enemies by surprise in PvP, or to just get some dodges without spending any additional, well, endurance. Now you do acquire this during Yura's quest line, and for the most part you do need to follow it. I've run different playthroughs, and in one of them I had to follow his quest line, starting from Limgrave, following to Liurnia, and you kind of have to take down these invasions until you reach to the second Church of Marika here in the Altus Plateau. And there's going to be a third invasion here from, well, in this case Eleonora. If you defeat her, she's gonna drop that pole blade for you. But I've discovered that I completely ignored that quest line in a different playthrough. I just went to the church and she spawned, I was able to kill her, and I got the pole blade anyway. So I'm pretty sure that under most circumstances you can just go there after like Godric, defeat that and just get the pole blade right away and not even care about Yura's questline, but it is awesome for the Ronin set and some other cool katanas in there. The other katana is going to be the Rivers of Blood. You get this from another invasion from the Church of Repose in the mountaintops, and this one is again also amazing. Well, lo and behold, it now finally works with the arcane scaling, and it's even more so going to deal a huge amount of damage with its L2 special, so this is another weapon that you can use with this build to work wonders. The way I recommend using this is especially if there's any enemies that tend to block a lot, because those spell effects slash the blood splatter literally bypasses anything, even walls. And you also follow up with a quick attack, so you follow with a 1-2 attack, you can then press L2 again, follow up with more L2 attacks, and you're gonna just spam that bleed up effect that's going to completely annihilate most of the enemies. It's not gonna be as strong as Mogwin's spear, but it's still amazing in most of the circumstances. Now, in both of the Rivers of Blood case as well as Eleonora's pole blade, you can be interrupted on the starting wind up, so you have to be careful about that. If enemies or PvP people catch you off guard or just hit you before you get to like charge them up with the L2s, you are going to get a ton of damage onto you and get interrupted and just mess up the entire thing. Both of Eleonora's pole blade and the Rivers of Blood can set enemies on fire, since they both come with additional fire damage. In this case, quite big actually. It's almost like the same amount from the physical when you upgrade this at the max, so it's all around just amazing. Now, in terms of the other equipment, here is what you're gonna be using. In this case, I do want to talk a bit about the fact that we did make use of the Dragon Communion seal, which also stacks with Arcane, and it's possibly one of the best seals in the game, since it gives you that incantation scaling, and also, well, you don't need that much faith into it. The reason why this could go very well with this build, if you sacrifice some points and just put them into faith, just 25 to use the golden vow that we talked about yesterday, which is going to give you a further 15% attack power increase and another 10% to your defenses, so you can deal a lot more damage, but you have to sacrifice some of the other stats to get 25 points into faith to even cast it, which in my opinion it's definitely worth it. But again, you can mix and match this, either go full Bloodloss or maybe make some faith into it. It's going to work wonders in both of these cases. In terms of the armor and the talismans, the most important are going to be the Lord's Blood Exaltation and the White Mask, both providing a very similar effect, increasing that attack power when there is Bloodlust nearby, and there's going to be a ton of that, trust me on that one. Now, the White Mask will give you about a 10% increase to attack power for about 20 seconds, meanwhile the Lord of Blood Exaltation gives about 15 to 20%, sometimes it's just 17 for some reason, but it's pretty good, and between these two you get a huge buff to even more attack power. Now, in terms of some of the other ones, of course, we're going to be using that charge skill, so we're going to want to buff attack power of skills. Shard of Alexander that you get by finishing Alexander's quest line is really amazing. You can also get the lesser version of this, which gives you about a 10% increase to your like skill attack power if you just kill him right away and not complete any of its quest line. Of course, you can also get it at the end of the quest line, since you get both the minor and the bigger version. Meanwhile, Godfrey Icon will further increase the capabilities of your spells and skills, so that's going to be another 10 to 15% increased damage, and yes, this includes for that blood ritual as well that you also charge when you do all of that damage. The final one in the talisman pouch is going to be all about preferences. Mine is Marika's Source Seal for the additional arcane, but more important, it gives me more into mind, so I really wanted a bit more mana over here to like be more easy to cast all of these spells against enemies. But obviously you can pick something else, including something that might buff up fire damage. Once you cast that fire ritual, your spear will be engulfed in flames, so now you can deal additional fire damage, and that's gonna stack with both faith and additional, well, fire damage talismans and fire damage buffs. Who knows, maybe even flame grant me strength could work really well with this build, but that's quite situational and you're probably just wasting time attacking it normally against bosses. Overall, I'm just in love how builds evolve in Elden Ring despite some of the recent nerfs and buffs. things change constantly, the game is very complex, and even if your favorite build falls off in a new update, there's something else to immediately take its place and maybe become even more powerful. This is the nature of From Software, and this is how it's going to be going forward. And yeah, just let me know what's your opinion on this. Did you had a chance to test these weapons? I definitely suggest doing so because you're gonna have a ton of fun. I guarantee you that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.